What's up, reality TV fam? Today we're diving into the latest Real Housewives of Salt Lake City episode, and trust me, this one had everything: confrontation, seasickness, and a Bravo crossover that nobody saw coming. Let's break it down YouTube style, the way commentary channels serve it up. With their fancy bags rolling behind them like a parade of luxury, the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City boarded Captain Jason's cruise ship as the sun glistened across the seas. There was a lot of excitement in the air because housewives' vacations are never just about rest. They serve as stages for alliances to change, battlegrounds, and moving confessionals. With a hesitant smile, Heather Gay scanned the deck while adjusting her sunglasses. Ever self-assured, Lisa Barlow strode by with her trademark vigor, already exuding the aura of someone who intended to take center stage. The soft wobble of the boat beneath her feet calmed Angie Katsanevas' exhilaration as she lingered close to the side. The housewives had their own storm, but the staff welcomed them with open arms. Tension boiled beneath the champagne toasts and laughter. The unsolved conflict between Heather and Lisa lingered like a shadow, just ready to catch fire. Angie's anxiety about the sea created a sense of uncertainty and served as a reminder that even the most opulent vacations might go awry. The women declared the beginning of their voyage, clinked glasses, and posed for pictures as the ship moved away from the wharf. Bravo viewers were aware that this was more than just a cruise. The expedition would be defined by the dramatic, seasick, and confrontational first act. Heather Gay's nerves were not much eased by the ship's mild sway. She had a silent tempest inside of her from the minute she boarded. Heather's thoughts were elsewhere, reliving every scathing remark and covert barb that Lisa Barlow had directed at her over the previous few weeks, even as her castmates' laughter reverberated across the deck. Heather shifted in an attempt to get rid of the discomfort, but the cruise ship's cramped quarters prevented her from doing so. Lisa was always nearby, her voice piercing discussions with that distinct assurance. The tension tightened like a cord around Heather's chest every time she saw her. She gave a courteous grin and clinked her glasses as required, but underneath, her tolerance was waning. Heather had always taken great pleasure in her strength and her ability to stick to her convictions, but now she found herself stuck on a ship with someone who appeared intent on undermining her. Although the ocean surrounded them indefinitely, Heather felt trapped. She was aware that the encounter she had been anticipating and covertly prepared for was just a matter of time. The cruise was no longer only a holiday. It was the platform where Heather would at last make her voice heard. Lisa Barlow had a presence that commanded attention as she strolled through the ship. She laughed sharply and purposefully, as if she wanted everyone to know that she was unaffected by the tension that was building around her. Her voice reverberated over the deck. Lisa exuded confidence, which seemed to increase with the number of people watching her, in contrast to Heather Gay's subdued uneasiness. She sipped her drink like a crown diamond while leaning against the railing and letting her hair catch the ocean breeze. Lisa saw this voyage as a step rather than a trap. She used every encounter as a chance to demonstrate her dominance, and that no number of covert packs or subtle jabs could unsettle her. The other housewives kept a close eye on her. While some found her posture admirable, others rolled their eyes at what they perceived as haughtiness. Lisa, however, did not recoil. Her sentences were precise and polished, as if she had practiced them long before the ship ever left port, and she spoke with conviction. She saw Heather's stress as evidence that Lisa was in control rather than as a danger. Lisa's confidence only increased as the ship moved farther away from land due to the waves. One audacious declaration at a time, she was taking control of the cruise rather than merely getting by. Angie Katsanevas began to feel uneasy as the ship continued to drift into open waters. She dismissed it at first, thinking it was nothing more than a slight dizziness. However, her confidence was soon undermined by the boat's continuous shaking. Her complexion turned pale, her smile wavered, and the glitter she had brought on the cruise started to fade. Angie fought a more subdued struggle as Heather and Lisa circled each other with abrasive words and strained emotions. With her eyes set on the horizon, she held onto the railing, hoping that the unending expanse of blue would calm her nausea. Angie's distress was genuine, despite the housewives' lighthearted taunts about her sea legs. Determined not to let seasickness take away her position in the group dynamic, she made an effort to laugh along. However, she was constantly reminded by the ship's sway that even opulent holidays were susceptible to human fragility. Bravo cameras and high-end clothing couldn't hide a body at war with the ocean. Angie's struggle gave the drama that was developing a surprising dimension. Angie emerged as the episode's comic relief as Heather and Lisa readied themselves for conflict, serving as a reminder that sometimes the greatest conflicts are waged with waves rather than words. The tension between Heather Gay and Lisa Barlow started to flicker, like a flame-gathering wind just as the trip was about to settle into its groove. It began modestly, with a quick glance across the dinner table and a remark that had just the right amount of bite to hurt. As Lisa's assurance flooded the room, Heather's already strained patience faltered. The other housewives could feel it right away. Eyes glanced between the two women as if anticipating the inevitable. Conversations halted, and laughing faded. Heather leant forward and questioned Lisa's loyalty and the way she disregarded her sentiments in a calm but frustrated tone. Never one to back down, Lisa responded with well-crafted remarks, stating that she had nothing to apologize for. Although there had not yet been a complete explosion, there were definitely sparkles. Every pause felt like a countdown, and every statement had weight. As the gathering realized they were seeing the start of something larger, the air became heavy and packed with expectancy. Together, Lisa's and Heather's voices shook with resistance and determination, laying the groundwork for the inevitable clash. The actual waves were building around the table, waves of contention that threatened to crash before the voyage was ended, even though the ship was rocking softly beneath them. The rest of the housewives were dragged into the whirlpool as Heather and Lisa's words grew more pointed. A heated argument swiftly turned into a group reckoning in which each woman had to choose her allegiance. Meredith Marks listened intently, leaning back and narrowing her eyes. Although she was slow to speak up, her quiet had weight, and Heather felt supported even though she didn't say a word. Whitney Rose, on the other hand, couldn't help but provide her viewpoint and gently steer the discussion in Lisa's direction while reminding everyone of Lisa's unwavering consistency. New to the company, but no stranger to confrontation, Monica Garcia watched with a mixture of interest and shrewdness. She was aware that supporting Lisa meant embracing strength and confidence, while supporting Heather meant supporting truth and vulnerability. Although she was clearly hesitant, her interest was even more apparent. The deck was split along invisible lines of loyalty rather than by actual space. While Lisa's polished rebellion appealed to some women, Heather's unvarnished honesty appealed to others. The conflict expanded throughout the entire ensemble, altering friendships, alliances, and the delicate balance of the group. It was no longer just between two housewives. The housewives realized this wasn't merely an argument when the ship was rocked by the seas. It was a watershed moment that would reverberate long after the cruise was over. Angie Katsanevas' modest struggle turned into a full-fledged conflict as the ship pressed farther out into the ocean. Every time the ship swayed, the soft swaying that had initially unnerved her felt unrelenting, causing her more anguish. Her face went pale, she slowed, and the glitz she brought with her to the vacation appeared to wane with each wave. Angie initially made an effort to hide it by making fake grins, drinking water, and making up silly jokes to justify herself. However, the reality was indisputable. No amount of bluster could cover up the way her body betrayed her. The seasickness had set in. Desperate to stabilize herself against the unending motion, she gripped the railing while keeping her gaze on the horizon. The other housewives became aware of it. Some made lighthearted jokes about her finding her sea legs, while others were really worried and urged her to take it easy. However, it was evident that Angie was determined to remain. Even though her body was telling her to back off, she didn't want to miss the drama between Heather and Lisa. Her struggle developed into an unanticipated storyline that combined vulnerability and comedic relief. Angie's war was against the water itself, in a society where housewives frequently employ words and coalitions. And as the waves continued to wash in, her seasickness served as a reminder that everyone is humbled by reality, even in Bravo's glitzy turmoil. The atmosphere changed when Captain Jason went onto the deck. In stark contrast to the housewives' seething tumult, his cool authority held a weight. He moved with the ease of someone who had survived storms far bigger than reality TV drama, all while dressed in clean white. For a brief moment, Heather and Lisa's tension subsided as they focused on him. As Captain Jason was a Bravo crossover, a character from below deck down under whose reputation preceded him, there was a mixture of curiosity and excitement. His presence gave the impression that the housewives had entered a new area of the Bravo realm, enlarging the cruise. With his voice solid against the sound of breaking waves, Jason gave them a cordial greeting. The housewives heard him talk of adventure, safety, and the beauty of the water, but they also heard a reminder that they were visitors to his world, which was ruled by order and discipline. The drama subsided for a moment. His confidence caused Angie, who was still pale from seasickness, to manage a smile. Despite their reluctance to give up their rivalry, Heather and Lisa refrained from using their acerbic remarks out of deference to the captain's authority. The craziness of housewives and the professionalism of below deck collided in a weird way. The stage was set for the drama to continue under the careful eye of a man who had handled both literal and figurative storms, as Jason's presence served as an anchor for the group. At last, the simmering tension exploded like a storm over the ocean. Heather Gay leant forward and let all the frustrations she had been holding inside for weeks, her voice shaking with determination. Every phrase carried the weight of unresolved frustrations, and every word was incisive. She accused Lisa Barlow of ignoring her emotions and putting self-interest ahead of devotion. Never one to back down, Lisa returned the fire with her own. Her sentences were polished and her tone was firm, but there was no denying the rebellion in her eyes. She insisted that Heather's story was misrepresented and that she was being unfairly singled out, refusing to be portrayed as the antagonist. The confrontation was loud, brutal, and unavoidable. It was no longer subtle. As the fight intensified, the other housewives sat motionless, their gazes flitting between the two women. Laughter stopped, and champagne glasses remained untouched. The real turbulence was at the table, yet the ship rocked softly beneath them. A symphony of pandemonium reverberated across the deck as Heather's voice raised and Lisa's became sharper. Unfiltered, intense, and destined to change the season, it was the kind of showdown Bravo viewers look forward to. Lisa refused to back down, Heather held her ground, and the housewives saw they were watching a conflict that would last long after the cruise was over. Heather Gay and Lisa Barlow's altercation left the deck in a state of oppressive quiet that persisted long after the yelling subsided. Heather sat back, trying to stabilize herself as her chest rose and fell. She experienced both empowerment and exhaustion from letting go of her pent-up frustration. She had been honest, but the price she paid was evident on her face, the vulnerability of showing her scars to both friends and cameras. Lisa, on the other hand, maintained her stance in defiance. Beneath the polished facade, the sting of accusation still lingered, despite her sharp words and unyielding tone. The encounter had worn down her armor, but she refused to allow Heather's story to define who she was. The assurance she brought with her on the ship suddenly felt put to the test, as if everyone watching her was gauging whether or not she had really held her ground. The other housewives around them dealt with the aftermath in different ways. Whitney's defense of Lisa solidified, Meredith's tacit support for Heather grew stronger, and Monica's indecisiveness became more nuanced. The conflict that had taken place in front of them had shattered the group and altered their alliances. Despite the mayhem above, the ocean kept rolling beneath the ship. However, the housewives saw the waves as a reflection of their feelings, erratic, crashing, and unavoidable. There was more to the repercussions than just Heather and Lisa. Every lady in the cast had to consider her place in the storm. Seasick and pale, but determined not to blend in, Angie Katsanevas staggered back into the spotlight just as the tension was about to overwhelm the entire deck. She had nearly cinematic timing. Angie's struggle served as a reminder to everyone that not all conflicts were verbal, even though Heather and Lisa had just let loose their rage. The housewives couldn't help but giggle as she mumbled about the ship's unrelenting sway while clutching her stomach. Even Heather, still agitated from her argument with Lisa, smiled grudgingly. Angie's suffering turned into the unanticipated comic relief, bringing something genuine and honest to lighten the mood. It was charming how she tried to maintain her glamour in spite of her seasickness. Despite her pale complexion, she said she was all right while wiping her face and adjusting her attire. Angie's will to stay a part of the group dynamic made her struggles strangely heroic, even if the housewives ridiculed her gently and offered her sympathy and ginger ale. Angie's seasickness served as a reminder that reality TV thrives on contrast in a culture that is based on drama and confrontation. Viewers were able to laugh, breathe, and recall that even housewives are susceptible to the power of the ocean because of her sensitivity, which softened the edges of the dispute. The housewives withdrew into their confessionals in the silent aftermath of the altercation, each one bearing her own version of events. Heather Gay's voice was solid, yet laced with tenderness, as she spoke with unfiltered emotion. She thought that by refusing to allow Lisa Barlow to ignore her sentiments any longer, she had finally taken a stand. For Heather, regaining her voice was more important than winning the argument. Lisa, on the other hand, looked back with solid assurance. She maintained that Heather had been wrongly portrayed as the aggressor and that her charges were overblown. In her eyes, she had stood up for herself with courage and honesty, refusing to concede to what she perceived to be Heather's skewed story. With her cautious and thoughtful statements, Meredith Marks provided a more collected viewpoint. She praised Heather's bravery but alluded to the fact that Lisa's resistance to compromise had widened the gap. Whitney Rose, on the other hand, leant close to Lisa, complimenting her consistency and expressing doubts about Heather's intentions. Monica Garcia, who was still figuring out where she fit in the group, acknowledged that she was conflicted, drawn to Lisa's tenacity, but also intrigued by Heather's sensitivity. Beyond merely expressing ideas, the reflections revealed the cast's cracks. Every woman's viewpoint became a component of a bigger picture, forming partnerships and establishing the tone for future events. The housewives recognized that the confrontation would reverberate in every subsequent interaction because it was more than simply a single instance. When the housewives became accustomed to the cruise's cadence, Captain Jason's arrival completely changed the mood. Now, it was more than simply a vacation. It was a Bravo crossover event, the kind of surprising turn that fans always hope for. The housewives, who were accustomed to controlling their own stage, were abruptly forced to share it with a character from a different area of the Bravo universe. In an instant, the energy changed. Still fuming by her argument with Lisa, Heather Gay had to admit that the situation was bizarre. Ever self-assured, Lisa Barlow embraced the crossover mood, viewing it as a chance to shine in front of a larger Bravo audience. Even though she was experiencing seasickness, Angie Katsanevas was excited about the opportunity to be a part of something greater than RHOSLC. The ship itself came to represent this blending of two worlds, the drama of housewives and the professionalism of below deck. The women posed for pictures, laughed, and marveled at the thought that a captain who had witnessed everything was now watching over their mayhem. The episode felt larger than life because it was more than simply a cruise. It was a collision of franchises and a merging of forces. For the housewives, it served as a reminder that their tales were woven into a larger Bravo fabric, where humor, drama, and surprising connections kept viewers interested week after week. Even though the trip was intended to be a holiday, it became evident that the Housewives had set the stage for something much more significant by the time the sun set. The altercation between Lisa Barlow and Heather Gay had exposed fault lines that could not be closed with courteous smiles or champagne toasts. Allegiances were rearranged, the group was split apart, and the impact of what had just happened was felt in every hushed discussion. Now that she had spoken her truth, Heather held herself with a calm resolve. She was aware that the fight had just begun. Likewise unwavering, Lisa's confidence hardened into defiance as she refused to allow Heather's charges define her. Their conflict had evolved into a plot point that would permeate every meeting, every occasion, and every shaky connection in the weeks ahead. It was also felt by the other housewives. Whitney's support for Lisa grew stronger, Meredith's devotion to Heather grew stronger, and Monica's uncertainty turned into a risky wild card. Even though Angie continued to suffer from seasickness, she was unable to divert attention from the approaching storm. The housewives were more than simply guests on Captain Jason's cruise as the ship sailed into the night. They were participants in a drama that had just finished its first act. Everyone knew that the ensuing explosion would influence the remainder of the season, since the altercation had set off a fuse. The housewives gathered for a last toast as the ship sailed back into calmer waters, their grins concealing the storm that had passed. Like the echo of thunder following lightning, the conflict between Heather Gay and Lisa Barlow remained in the air, unsaid but indisputable. Knowing that she had at last spoken her truth, Heather carried herself with a quiet resolution. Despite the group's continued division, Lisa remained confident and strong, refusing to let the altercation define her. Despite being exhausted from her struggle with seasickness, Angie Katsanevas was able to chuckle, her vulnerability acting as a peculiar type of glue to soften the night's edges. With their conflicting allegiances creating a web of tension that hinted at more drama to come, Meredith, Whitney, and Monica each had their own perspectives. The commotion had been stabilized by Captain Jason's presence, whose cool professionalism served as a reminder that the sea was vast and that their drama, albeit intense, was only one storm among many. The housewives, however, will never forget this cruise. It was more than just a journey. It was a pivotal moment in their lives, a collision of personalities and franchises that altered them. The women lifted their glasses one more time as the shore's lights came into view. The laughter came back, but behind it was the reality. The journey had prepared the ground for conflicts that would not yet be fought, friendships that would not yet be tried, and a season that would bear the consequences of all that had transpired on the high seas.